All right, folks, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online, number 38. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to check in on a Monday night here. Pretty low-key podcast, not going to get into too much, but I didn't podcast after last night's Summer League game. We got a Russell Westbrook update. I wanted to talk about Julian Strawther, and I also wanted to talk about the Nuggets depth chart as I was looking at it today and realized, I have some concerns. We're going to get into some concerns in just a few minutes here, but really quickly want to thank everybody for stopping by. Always appreciate it when folks are hanging out in the chat on a July 15th kind of day. Very excited for all of this, and always helpful if you like and subscribe to the video. The Russell Westbrook update will be in the second segment, so if you are waiting for that, probably skip ahead just a little bit if you're watching this after the fact. But for the most part, I do want to talk about that in a little bit here, but I'm going to go over the Summer Nuggets first. Real quickly, though, this podcast is brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online. They're doing a great deal where you can make sure, head over to their website today, use promo code BELIEVE, and you'll get 50% off on your welcome bonus on a first deposit up to $250. That's a lot. That's a pretty good deal. They're your number one source for all your sports betting needs, from baseball and golf to soccer, right on over to the top fights with UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads. Head over to their website today and use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Okay, let's get into this now. Going to be interesting to see how Denver sort of evolves over the course of Summer League, but through 2 games of Summer League, they are 0-2. Obviously, and I said this last night online, the Deron Holmes injury, it took the wind out of the sails of everything for me. It's hard to talk about just how awesome everything is and how players are doing when a serious injury like that happens. Update on Deron Holmes. He had surgery on his right Achilles tendon at the UC Health Clinic in Denver. They didn't actually say that it was successful, but I'm just going to sit here and say it was successful because I mean, they usually in these situations, they say successful surgery. I don't want to get anybody like worried or anything like that, but they did say he had surgery and that, quote, updates on Deron's status will be provided as appropriate, which most likely to me means that he's going to be like out for a long time and an update will not occur for a long time. So don't expect any updates in the near future. I'd also, like I said before, expect him to be out for the 2024-25 season. He can make a full recovery, but it is going to take a significant period of time, perhaps a full year, maybe more. Maybe the next time the Nuggets fans end up seeing Deron Holmes is in next year's Summer League, and we will be able to go over that when it happens. Okay. Other updates and other thoughts on the team without Deron Holmes, because obviously Denver built this roster with the idea that Deron Holmes would be a big part of it, that he would be getting a lot of minutes. Yes, he's pretty new, and obviously like Denver knew going into it that he would be a rookie. He's not going to immediately assume responsibility for a whole bunch of stuff, but he was going to be their starting power forward next to PJ Hall, and then he probably would have moved over to backups or to starting center at some point where they kind of change up their lineups a little bit. Without Deron Holmes, the team is suddenly very small, very unathletic. Denver in this last game without Holmes started Trey Alexander and Jalen Pickett together. Julian Strawther moved over to the small forward spot, while Hunter Tyson moved to power forward and PJ Hall to center. And then Denver played an 8-man rotation, which I thought was pretty interesting. A 9-man rotation in game 1 and an 8-man rotation in game 2. Pretty small, trying to give those guys as much minutes as possible. They are skilled. Clearly, the entire group there is pretty skilled with outside shot making. but there's very little rim pressure and very little rim protection on the other end of things. And so you just got to know what you're getting with this kind of team. Denver shooting a very low percentage from 2-point range. They're not really finishing that well, and they're bothered by contests. So I think that that's going to shape what their roster kind of and how it plays. Obviously, wins and losses don't really matter in this stage, but they're going to really struggle without Holmes because he's the guy who provides athleticism, shot blocking, rim pressure, things like that. So you got to take this all with a grain of salt because Denver was built around DaRon Holmes' athleticism. Now they don't really have that. But other than DaRon Holmes, some notes that I have on different guys. I'll start off with Julian Strawther because he's the one who's made the largest splash. He's averaging 28.5 points per game between the two games. Had 25 in game one, had 32 in game two. The first game was pretty inefficient, and I think it was very emblematic of a gunner shooting guard whose sole purpose is to come off the bench, hit some shots at the NBA level. That's what Julian showed in that game, and he showed enough. And I felt pretty comfortable in his role and what he was going to be asked to do for Denver after game one. And then game two happened, and he played a lot better. A lot better. It was nice to see for sure. 20 free throw attempts was notable to me. He's going to need the ball, and he's going to need to make his free throws in order for that to happen. But he's operating on and off the ball. It's the right call for his development. I know that there's been some pushback, especially on the timeline to, hey, why does he need to have the ball in his hands? What's the point of that? Well, to me, if the Nuggets want Julian Strawther to be more than just a backup bench shooting guard gunner, like somebody who I've coined Terrence Ross. Terrence Ross could never really be a starter at the NBA level because he did one thing really well, and that was shoot the basketball. He was not a good defender, not a good passer, and didn't really connect well with teammates by doing other things. Strawther is kind of like, especially if you just look at his rookie numbers, kind of fits into that realm. But when you squint hard enough and you start to see some of the skill development, the free throw shooting and the free throw drawing was pretty important. And I think the passing and being able to handle the ball and handle playmaking responsibility is really important for being a starter, especially in the modern NBA, where point guards don't control the ball all the time. They can get off the ball. They can just be scorers. They're not just facilitating, trying to set you up for shots. Denver's a little bit more unique because they've got Jokic. But for Denver, you've got to be able to run pick and roll and DHO if you are a guard in order to operate with Jokic. And I think that Strawther can do that after what I've seen so far. He can run that. It's going to need some work. It's clearly he's not perfect. He's averaging a high number of turnovers, but he'll be okay on that front. And this is where he is in year two. I can imagine where he'll be in year 5, year 6, and be very happy about that. Of course, that is kind of the rub with all of this youth and development, because Denver may not have to, he may not be perfectly ready for this in year 2. And the peak of what you're probably getting from Julian Strawther is a little bit down the line. So we'll see how that affects next season. The defense was fine in a summer league standpoint. It will be fine. He competes. I'm not really worried about it being 6'7" and reasonably athletic, not a super athlete or anything like that, but solidly athletic. He is fine in that regard on the wing. But just going back to the numbers as a rookie, I want to make sure to point this out and make sure that this gets hammered home. Strawther had a 20.7% usage rate and a 48.2% true shooting percentage in 545 minutes as a rookie. I went back through the database on StatHead, Basketball References database, and I looked up different rookies that played under 1,000 minutes and had those kind of shooting numbers. It is not kind. It is not a good profile for a player that is ultimately successful in the NBA. You've got some names in there like Michael Porter Jr., who like obviously had a higher true shooting percentage than that. I'm mostly talking about the usage and the minutes load. But guys like Will Barton, like he ultimately became successful. He was a success story for Denver. But for the vast majority of those players, they do not pan out. They don't ever become valuable rotation players, not even starters. So Strawther's already operating from a position of weakness here. And it's got to be about the skill development and just play and becoming a better player for him to actually translate that to the NBA. He's got to be more efficient. 48% true shooting is horrible. It is disgusting, especially in the modern NBA, where average true shooting at this point is around 56, 57. Like we're creeping up higher and higher because the game's getting better and better. I don't expect Julian to be automatically at that level in year 2, but for the Nuggets to give him a role that means a lot of shooting, that means a lot of scoring and decision making and playmaking over 1,500 minutes, which I think he's going to play, kind of like Peyton Watson last year. I think he's got to be more efficient for sure. It's got to be more, it's got to be impactful, and the team has to trust him. We will see what they ultimately do and how he ultimately responds to that. But I thought game 2, showing some passing, showing some off the dribble game where he was getting to the rim. If he can get to the rim, make free throws, because he shot like 71% last year and actually was like a 74% free throw shooter in college. If that goes up, if that's like 80, 85% that he's actually getting there more consistently, then you're starting to talk about a real weapon as a scorer. So I hope that he can get there. I think he's got the talent to do it, but we're going to find out for real. Like, we'll see, because he's going to get the opportunity. Denver does have, I'm going to go over the depth chart in a bit. They do not have another choice. Like, Strawther's got to play. So we will ultimately see what it becomes. Okay, spent a lot of time on Julian. Jalen Pickett, he has really struggled to do anything right now. Had a nice transition block in game 2 in the clutch, has had some moments where he set the table for guys. Like Julian's gotten some open shots, Trey Alexander's gotten some open shots in order to like make some of their buckets, and that's come because Jalen has set them up. Unfortunately, those have been few and far between, and they got even fewer in game 2. The big issue with Jalen, in my opinion, is that he is really struggling to generate any space. Any. Guys are hounding him. You know, the point guards that are like, think about the way that Jamal Murray was being dealt with and defended last year. Like Austin Reeves was picking him up full court the entire first round. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels took turns in the second round, just hounding him full court. And he couldn't get free because he didn't have the burst, the athleticism, the health to be able to do it. Pickett looks like that at the summer league level right now. And Pickett's 24, while some of these other guys are younger than him. I'm worried about that. That to me is very, very scary about his actual development, because I did not expect that to be an issue for him. Whether it's in the like getting the ball across the timeline, whether it's turning the corner and pick and roll, whether it's isolating against a big man in the switch, he is not getting space against anybody. And he just looks really uncomfortable in most of these situations because like, he's having to give up the ball more and more. And in game 2, he scored 1 point. I think he took like 3 or 4 shots because the better option was to get the ball and put it into Julian Strawther's hands or even Trey Alexander's hands, who Denver just drafted. So that is not a good indication. And I'm worried. I would like to see Pickett bounce back. I think he's capable of bouncing back, but he has to be aggressive and actually believe that this is going to happen. And if he doesn't believe in it, if the Nuggets don't believe in it, then that's going to be an issue. I thought that Jalen being the strong, like physical point guard that he was built to be, I thought that he'd be able to carve out some space that way. But between the jumper, which just looks so off, and then not really attempting any layups or anything like that, I am like, that's not a good indication. So the defense has also been subpar. Teams are shooting over him, and some guards are also driving right by him in isolation. And that happened in the clutch yesterday. So it just can't happen. Like Jalen's got to be better. And I look forward to seeing whether he can respond in this moment, because it was a really, really, really bad look in the first two games. And I think he can get better, but we got to be honest about it, right? Like, it has been tough. Hunter Tyson, I have him labeled as a limited shooter right now. Still making his outside shots when open, but teams are starting to learn to close out really hard on him. And the reason why is because he's not a big threat to put the ball on the floor. He's got limited quickness. Players are able to catch up to him as long as they don't leave their feet on a closeout. And when he does that, there are some times where he can actually make plays and he can actually see the floor reasonably well. He's made passes to PJ Hall. I think he set up Deron Holmes once in game one. He can make some plays off the dribble for others. And that's a good thing to see. Like, he has his head up. He can see the floor. It's not like he's entirely inept at making a play for other people. The defense was better in game two than game one. I thought the game one defense was horrible from him. That could just be anecdotally. I didn't go back and watch it. But he's still struggling, in my opinion, Hunter Tyson, to commit to closeouts when he has to recover out to the perimeter. And often that leads to two things. One, if he closes out short, guys are shooting over him and they're making. Or they're missing, but it's an open shot, and like, you don't want to give up too many of those. Or the other is he closes out too hard, gets blown by to the rim, and forces the defense to rotate, and then that generates an open shot somewhere else. He competes really hard. There's no question about that. No question at all. And like, the shooting, I think, is real. I think he's got a great stroke. But he's just a limited player at this stage, and I'm not sure where that athleticism is going to come from. He just, to me, seems like a player that is going to struggle at the NBA level to execute team defensive schemes, especially defensive schemes run by the Nuggets, where players have to collapse into the paint pretty hard in order to cover for Jokic, in order to cover for, let's say it's Dario Saric. Dario's not a mobile guy, and he's going to be in the middle of Denver's defense and their bench a lot. They're going to need to play smaller. They're going to need to play with more athleticism on the perimeter. And that, to me, is like, I struggle to see Hunter Tyson getting minutes with the Nuggets for that reason, at least next year. Maybe it happens in year three. Maybe there's some athletic developments that he can continue to make. I just have questions. He was, I think, a college guy for 5 years. I'm not sure where that athleticism is going to come from at this stage, but who knows? Maybe he surprises, and maybe he looks better in the upcoming games. Like, that could absolutely happen. Next, Trey Alexander. I think Trey's an NBA player. He's been behind Julian Strawther, he's been the second most impressive Nugget, for sure. And whereas Pickett has struggled to generate separation, I feel like Alexander's done a pretty good job consistently of getting open. And then even if he's not like fully open, just taking advantage of the space that he does get. Whereas Pickett, I think, is navigating a little bit too much. He plays with his back to the hoop a lot of the time. Alexander's got his head up and he is moving. He's looking to score. Off the dribble game is nice and smooth. He leverages that into some playmaking opportunities. It's been good to watch. Can get lost defensively at times for sure, but when he's on the ball, he makes his opponent work and looks pretty solid. And he also has recovery capabilities with the wingspan and the athleticism that he has. He's 6'10", and that's going to screw some guys up. Like, whereas I think Jalen Pickett is more of like a 6'5", 6'6" kind of wingspan guy. Having 4 extra inches hey yo, and some more athleticism, definitely helps in defense. Definitely helps in closeouts. Definitely helps uh, poking away the basketball at times. Like that will be important for Trey Alexander's development. I've liked it. I think he looks great. There have been some comparisons made to Jamal Murray in terms of how he shoots, how he plays, and I can see that. So if he continues on this track, he might get some minutes next year. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy to me. So, like, look, and he might deserve it. That's the thing. So we'll see where he happens, what ultimately becomes of it. But I am looking forward to what we see from Trey Alexander for the rest of his career. And finally, PJ Hall. Uh, Not enough other guys have played consistently for me to really cover too much. But I think PJ Hall, after a tough game one, bounced back a little bit in game two. The thing that stands out most to me with him is that he's undersized at the center position, and rebounding is going to be a weakness. There have been too many possessions where the ball kind of bounces outside of his area and he's not able to collect it. Some guys that's going to happen to pretty consistently, and you're not like always going you're not always going too bad. Like I think that PJ can succeed at the NBA level. He's got to be a jump shooter though. Like he's got to be able to take the pick and pop three. I saw at one point, I think it was Sam Vecini of The Athletic, make a Mike Muscala comparison with him. And I can see that. Mike Muscala is not a big player. He's, I think, more like 6'9", 6'10", but he's got pretty close to what PJ Hall's wingspan is. So it's basically the same. And the thing that made Mike Muscala valuable at the NBA level was he became a pick and pop five. Not a good defender or anything like that, but he can make the offense better by being involved in the action, making plays. PJ Hall hasn't really had success out of the post, but he has been okay on switches, and especially in the defensive side of things. On the offensive side of things, I think he needs, if he wants to be in the post, he's got to find more opportunities for the switch against guards, against wings. He's been posting up too many bigs, and that to me is just like, look, that's probably not going to be his game, and that's fine. I don't think he's athletic enough to be at the four consistently, but I think he would be fine defending on switches. I think that's not going to be much of an issue. But again, backup potential for Jokic maybe down the line. I'm not really thinking about it that hard. He will play in the G League for most of the time, and I actually think that he could be a pretty good G League player for Denver. But we'll find out. We'll find out. We will see. And I am looking forward. Like, Denver's got so many bigs, and we're going to talk about them in the next segment. But they've got so many bigs. I don't expect PJ Hall to ever be considered for playing time much this year. But if he did play, I think that there's at least a potential that if he shoots 35+% from three, there's at least some utility in that. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to chat about the Russell Westbrook rumor. See, we got some more people in here for that. Should be very interesting. I will be discussing that, and I'm also going to be discussing like why I think he will be going to the Nuggets, and I'm not as concerned about the trade aspect of it. We will be right back. But first, I got to tell everybody about number 38, the affiliate for Mile High Sports and one of the best bars in the Rhino area. Great opportunity. You get a wristband, you put it on, you scan it, sign up for that. It's not really like a sign up process. You just check it in, and then you use your wristband to pay, and you don't have to use your card until the end of the night. It's great. It's really, really easy. So I'm very excited for all of that, all the things that they do. If we ever do any more events over there, which I assume that we will, starting up in the football season, head on over, let them know that you came from Mile High Sports. They'll do $15 pitchers, and pitchers are pretty good. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we're back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Really appreciate it. Cedric, I am not giving you hot take ideas for a separate podcast. Like, what are we doing? Come on, man. Like I'm friends with the DNVR guys, but like, come on. Okay, here. Let's think of one then. Let's think of a funny one then. Let's say that Michael Porter Jr. is going to average over 22 points per game next year after never averaging 20 points per game before in his life. That's my guess. That's a good hot take. And I think it's like not crazy because of the role that he's going to get. I think he's going to take more threes. I think he's going to take more shots. He's going to have more responsibility. And part of that is just going to that's absolutely going to lead into more points. So I do not expect him to average 16.7 points per game. I expect it to be much closer to 20. And if it pops, if he does pretty well, then who knows? Maybe it's even higher than that. It would be pretty funny if yeah, don't bring up Murray. That's a good call. But yeah, it would be pretty interesting if Porter averaged more points than Murray. I don't think that's ever going to happen though. Okay. Hurricane, I think that's undoubted. And that's all I'm going to say to that. Okay. Let me go back to my notes. Let's talk about this Russell Westbrook update. Shams Charania in his notebook today for The Athletic came out with just a little quick note. It's nothing crazy. I'm going to share the entirety of it here in quotations. Quote, the Clippers and Russell Westbrook plan to part ways this offseason, and the franchise continues to discuss trades for the former NBA MVP. Team and league sources said. The Denver Nuggets are a frontrunner to sign Westbrook if he becomes a free agent. End quote. Okay. So, couple things. Team and league sources is an important distinction there. Because like the Clippers are trying to part ways. Like it's become very clear. Everybody's known it. The Clippers do not want Russell Westbrook again on their team. I don't know if that's like a Russ thing because Russ said that he would be happy being there playing any role. He opted into his player option. But it also just kind of seems like he was not necessarily super comfortable playing behind James Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and then getting benched for guys like Terrence Mann. Apparently, and I heard this off the record, he didn't necessarily have a great response to Norman Powell getting a whole bunch of six-man of the year buzz. That's not great, especially if you want somebody who's just willing to buy and wants to win a championship. You can't really do it on your terms, especially if you're making $4 million a year. And then, like, I think what's going on right now. Let me break it down. Clippers don't want him. They don't want him. They want to continue to find a spot for him. The Denver Nuggets are a front runner to sign Westbrook if he becomes a free agent. If he becomes a free agent, the Nuggets do not want to trade for Russell Westbrook. That's not what they want. They prefer for him to be bought out or waived by a team and then to sign him for the minimum. That's what they hope. One, they do not want to trade for him because of the $4 million versus the $2 million veteran minimum. There is a goal to save some luxury tax money if this is what it comes down to. And I think that is what it comes down to. And here's a question. Even for Zeke, asks Evil Lord Beerus. Shout out Beerus. I don't think that the Clippers want Zeke Naji. And I can say that pretty certainly. Like, maybe the Nuggets would be willing to offer Zeke Naji, but I do not think that the Clippers want him because they also have, I believe, like 15 roster spots taken up. And they haven't officially signed Chris Dunn yet because Russell Westbrook is on the roster. So they're waiting for this to happen. I don't think they want to take anything back. And so they're just trying to get any asset that they can. They want somebody to take on Russell Westbrook's $4 million, and they would like a second round pick, a top 55 protected second round pick, whatever it is. They just don't want to have to pay to get off of Russ. They also don't want to waive him for nothing because they, like everybody else, are worried about the second apron. They're worried about the luxury tax and things of that nature. There are some kind of schematic things. They don't want to waive him because they want to use some of that money to pay Chris Dunn the money that they can. So, because of that, we're kind of at an impasse. The Clippers also just don't want to do the Nuggets any favors by just waiving him or sending him out along with an asset just so that he can get cut and then sign with the Nuggets for that minimum. That's not what the Clippers want. So they are holding this thing up. The Nuggets feel, rightly or wrongly, that they can get Russell Westbrook without having to trade for him. And so I decided, because I thought, that doesn't sound right. Can't the team trade for $4 million of Russell Westbrook? Couldn't they justify having Russell Westbrook as their backup point guard? Like, couldn't a contender somewhere justify that? So I went around and looked. I looked at all 30 teams. Actually, no, I didn't look at all 30 teams. I looked at every team that feels like they're a playoff team, which is basically 12 teams in the West and like 8 or 9 teams in the East. And I basically said, okay, we're going to go through this list. Which of these teams has a hole at backup point guard that they feel like Russell Westbrook could fill, and it's actually justified? So the West playoff teams, you've got the Thunder, the Nuggets, the T-Wolves, the Clippers, the Mavs, the Suns, the Lakers, the Pelicans, the Kings, the Warriors, and the Grizzlies. I think that's 11. The teams that are absolutely not, no way in hell, we are not taking back Russ. Obviously the Clippers, obviously the Lakers. And I put the Warriors on there because they've got 15 players on their roster. They've already got Steph, they've got Pods, they've got some young guys, they've got some guards. D'Anthony Melton's on their team. Like, Russ doesn't really fit there, and I don't think they have the money to do it anyway. Doesn't make sense. You've got the T-Wolves, who just drafted Rob Dillingham. They're not going to block him. The Mavs, they don't have the money to do it after all their cap shenanigans. And the Suns, who just signed Monte Morris. And then maybe I could justify it if I wanted to. The Thunder, the Pels, the Kings, the Grizzlies. For various reasons, I think that they could justify it. The Thunder probably have too many guards, but you could see why they'd be interested in Russell Westbrook. The Pelicans, I don't think they have the matching contracts to trade for him, but they would potentially want to sign him for the same vet minimum that the Nuggets would. The Kings, I don't know. Kings is an interesting one. We'll see about that one. They did just bring back Malik Monk, but I think that the Russ and DeMar kind of pairing seems interesting. And then the Grizzlies, who right now their backup is either Marcus Smart kind of staggered from the second unit, or it's Derrick Rose, maybe Desmond Bane. I think that they could justify it. But then the only team that really makes sense to me is the Nuggets, who have a clear need for a backup point guard. And they're desperate. Among the East playoff teams, you've got the Celtics, the Knicks, the Bucks, the Cavs, the Magic, the Pacers, the Sixers, the Heat, and the Hawks. The absolutely not teams are the Knicks and the Pacers. The Knicks just signed Cameron Payne today. He is their third point guard, maybe their fourth, because they've got Deuce McBride, obviously Jalen Brunson, and they just drafted Tyler Kolek. So I just don't think that Russ makes sense there. Pacers obviously have Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, and TJ McConnell. That's a no. And you've got the Celtics, the Bucks, the Magic, and the Sixers, who for various reasons it doesn't make sense. Maybe I could justify it, the Cavs, the Heat, and the Hawks. Cavs, I think I could justify more than any of them because they've got, like, they're going to stagger Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, but both of those guys can play off the ball and can space the floor for Russ at times. And I think that that could make some sense. But the others, like the Hawks, they just drafted Kobe Buffkin, I think, a couple of years ago. They're going to want to give him an opportunity. They just broke up DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. You really think they want to pair Russ? And then the Heat have 15 roster spots already taken up, so they'd have to move somebody. Obviously, they would, but like the matching contract salaries that make sense are players that they just signed this year. So it'd be tough. That'd be a tough one. Maybe like Josh Richardson. Although I don't know if he signed this year or if he signed last year. Either way, I don't think any team actually makes real sense for Russell Westbrook other than the Nuggets. All the reporting, everything I've heard behind the scenes, everything that people have told me, everything that has been reported, the only team that has been paired with Russell Westbrook as a destination is the Denver Nuggets. Jake Fisher, Shams Charania. I don't know if Woj just said so or not, but like it's like all the major news breakers have said it. I have heard it. Other Nuggets reporters have heard it. Like, this is not just coming out of left field. And I know that people are talking about clickbait and things like that. This is not clickbait. This is probably happening. It's just taking a lot of time because the Clippers are holding things up. Here's what the perspective means. The Nuggets are so desperate at this point that they're even considering this, given the way that Russ has kind of worked out for each of the last 4 or 5 stops that he's had. That is a desperate team that the Nuggets are right now. And I'm not sure whether this is a good plan, whether it's a bad plan, but there are not a lot of other teams that are justifying trying to go get Russell Westbrook at $4 million. So take that for what you will. This also says to me how little leverage the Nuggets even have against them, despite the fact that the Nuggets are as desperate as they are. Like, the Clippers are perhaps like out of leverage. Like, it would be crazy. So, like, would the Clippers wait it out as long as they can? But are they willing to bring Russ to media day? Are they willing to bring him into the season? Would they keep him at home? Would they just play 14 players? Don't they want that roster spot? These are the things that they're having to kind of weigh. Russ is probably going to be a Nugget at the end of the day, which, if that was the actual plan, it does mean that the Nuggets executed their plan, but it's Russ and Dario Saric as bench reserves, and then part of their plan was Deron Holmes, who, like, nobody can predict it, but he tore his Achilles. It's horrible. But if that was the plan, along with kind of elevating every young player up a rung in the ladder, not sure if I like it. Last thing here, we'll probably spend like 8 to 10 more minutes on this. The Nuggets depth chart is as follows. At point guard, you've got Jamal Murray, hopefully Russell Westbrook if this all goes according to the plan, Jalen Pickett, and then Trey Alexander as a two-way contract guy. At shooting guard, you've got Christian Brown and Julian Strawther. At small forward, you've got Michael Porter and Peyton Watson. At power forward, you have Aaron Gordon, Vlatko Čančar, Hunter Tyson, and then Deron Holmes, who's out. And then at center, you've got Nikola Jokic, Dario Saric, Zeke Naji, and DeAndre Jordan. And then PJ Hall is the backup there. You can quibble with some of the positions, like maybe you want Hunter Tyson as the small forward, maybe you want Zeke Naji as one of the power forward options going forward. Okay. The point of this being is that Denver's very light in the backcourt. They do not have a lot of guards. They do not have a lot of wings. With KCP and Bruce Brown leaving, Reggie Jackson getting traded, and then Denver kind of pivoting, like they haven't brought back Justin Holiday. I don't expect him to come back. Denver suddenly has 10 front court players and only 4 until Russell Westbrook signs backcourt players. And two of the front court players I'm talking about, Michael Porter and Peyton Watson, also kind of trends toward the power forward position instead of the shooting guard position. So like I wouldn't call them backcourt players at all. And yet Denver's going to have to play those guys in big lineups because they do not have a bunch of wings. Denver used to have more. They certainly used to have more. But kind of going away from that and not really replacing it. And Zeke Naji's still on the roster, and I'm not sure if he's going to stay. I'm not sure if Denver's going to pivot. But because of the way things have kind of worked out, Denver's got a lot of bigs. They've got a lot of power forwards. They've got a lot of guys that should play power forward. And they do not have a lot of wings, which help them win a title. So with that in mind, Russ should help, obviously. But a backcourt injury is going to hurt them. It will. And Jamal Murray, who just played 59 games, who has shown that he can't play more than 65 for most every year. If he's going to be your main guy, and then you're elevating third-year guy Christian Braun into a shooting guard spot, you're trusting Julian Strawther, second-year player, to be one of your primary backups, and you're trusting a volatile, and like nobody can argue with that, a volatile Russell Westbrook as your backup point guard. That is dicey. And then if you remove one of those guys from the equation, it feels like a house of cards. Like it's just going to come toppling down. Fortunately, Denver has Jokic, but if you miss multiple of those guys, then you're all of a sudden in a lot of trouble. So, can Denver go into the season that way? Maybe. If they feel like Trey Alexander can play, maybe they're fine. Like if you feel like Trey Alexander's actually a weapon and can play, maybe he plays a little bit of point, a little bit of shooting guard. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's okay. I just get very nervous about it because after watching the NBA, seeing where things go, seeing how Denver, like they are in the stage, they're in the stage of their tenure as a title team where guys start to get hurt and like start to get really hurt because they are older and they're surprisingly older, especially with their starters. It's one of the reasons why Calvin Booth has gone more for young guys off the bench. He wants energy and athleticism and some guys that are healthy, guys that can bounce back. That would be great. But I just don't believe in it. I just don't know. And I am just very worried that the wrong injury at the wrong time, or maybe like Jokic misses 5 games in a row and the team goes 1-4 in that stretch, is really going to depress Denver's win total in a very constant, in a very constant way where like they're all of a sudden fighting for a 5th seed or a 6th seed. And people are not going to want to hear that, but that is on the table. I don't think that they can be any lower than a 6th seed realistically, unless, knock on wood, Nikola Jokic has some sort of longer-term injury. I think they can survive even Murray being out for a significant period, especially if they have a player like Russell Westbrook, who's like, the good thing about Russ is he stays pretty healthy. Like he plays a lot. And then Christian Braun played 82 last year. So we'll see. We will see what they ultimately look like, what this ultimately does. But I just don't think that Denver's roster is quite balanced enough. And I think that if I am looking at potential issues that the Nuggets could face this upcoming season, that is one of them. That let's say Christian Braun, who you're expecting to play like 80 games, let's say he misses 3 weeks, or let's say he breaks a wrist or something like that, then you're all of a sudden really thin and just puts a lot of pressure in the wrong places. And I think that could be Very, very difficult. Okay, folks, I think that's going to do it. Good episode today. I think this one was pretty good. I prepared a lot for this one, wanted to make sure to give you some good content. I hope you agree. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Going to continue to try to do some things over the course of this offseason. I know you see that lamp that's in front of the Denver Nuggets poster. I am in the process of moving. So over the course of these next couple weeks, you're going to see the setup change. I'm going to do my best to give a much better setup that makes sense for a podcast. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the show. Really appreciate all the love and support on the podcast as always. Let me know what you're looking for and if you agree with any of my takes and what comes next. I'll talk to you guys very soon.